Stop overcomplicating your life. In this episode of the Be Unmessable With podcast, you are going to learn how a blind athlete used 3 simple steps to go from rock bottom to the Paralympics and how you can apply those steps today.
Hey there, and welcome to Be Unmessable With the podcast. My name is Josselyne Herman-Saccio. I am your host, and today my guest is Kyle Coon. He is a Paralympian, a professional speaker, an author, a podcaster, and Exactly What to Say certified guide. We will find out more about that momentarily. He lost his sight at the age of 6 after a battle with retinoblastoma. But shortly after losing his sight, he was encouraged to live and pursue a life of adventure by world-class blind athlete Eric Weihenmayer. Now, Kyle ended up taking his advice and took it really to heart and actually went on to become a competitive rock climber, a downhill skier, a wrestler, and an endurance athlete. I am so happy Kyle said yes to being on the show. So let's welcome Kyle Coon. Welcome, Kyle. Hi, Kyle.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, well, you're such a fascinating guy, and it's funny, I know you're a Paralympian, and I just recently went to the Paralympics, although when this airs, it'll be not so recently, in Paris, and it was fascinating, and I was so excited to have you on here to just kind of talk about your journey and how you ended up doing what you're doing as an author and a speaker and a podcaster. Tell us about how you ended up doing this.
Oh my gosh. Well, children, gather around the fire. It is story time.
That's my whole life. There you go.
Exactly. My journey really began, golly, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. No, I was diagnosed with a rare form of eye cancer when I was about 10 months old and went through, 5 or 6 years of various cancer treatments until what eventually happened was the treatment just damaged my eyes so much that my left eye had to be removed when I was 5, and my right eye just before I turned 7. And as you can probably imagine, that left when a 7-year-old kid is all of a sudden can't see at all. Um, you know, not too happy a camper. For the longest time, I had just told my doctors, "Hey, just make me better so I can go outside and play with my friends." And well, they took the cancer away, and well, now how do I go outside and play with my friends? So I was very fortunate, though, that my parents got connected with the right people through the right networks, and I met a gentleman named Eric Weihenmayer, who at the time was becoming pretty well known as a totally blind adventure athlete. And so he and I met not too long after I lost my sight, and he gave me just a little verbal slap upside the head and just said, "Hey, if you don't let your blindness get in your way, you can actually have a pretty fulfilling life. So go try rock climbing." And so I did. And I went and
How great.
gave rock climbing a go, and that spiraled off into all kinds of different adventures. And eventually, I looked up, and I had been on national television. I had done cool adventure sports and athletics around the world, and made it to college, made it through college, graduated from college in 3 years, and I just thought I was the hottest thing on the planet Earth. What 20, I was, and I can very confidently and, humbly say that, I was a 21-year-old arrogant piece of, Bullstein. So
I think many of us at 21 could probably relate now,
Exactly. And, looking, now at 32, 33 years old, I can look back and say that, with confidence and, knowing that I was definitely too big for my britches. But basically, at 21 years old, I thought I was so all that I said, I'm going to apply for every job CEO and above. And so decided that was the path I was going to take. And well, quickly realized that was not the case. You have to actually work your way up from the
Yeah.
bottom to the top, not from the top to the
Top.
top to
The
the top
topper.
to the top. So so I started doing what I say is climbing my way down the corporate ladder until I fell off the bottom rung, hit the ground, started digging a hole, and trying to go all the way to China. So I eventually figured out that my life was just a mess, and the kicker kind of came when I walked into a grocery store, applied to be a bag boy, and didn't get the job.
That would
And
be hitting bottom, I would say. That could have
yeah,
definitely messed with you in the spirit of being unmessable with. I always ask the our guests to share a situation where the circumstances were so difficult that it could have taken them out for the count, but they transcended above it and emerged unmessable with. So this sounds like we got the makings of one of those messable with moments here.
definitely trending that way. So yeah, it was definitely a gut check moment. And at that point I was also I was probably 20 or 30 pounds heavier than when I had been when I had graduated from college. I was drinking a lot. I was physically a mess, mentally a mess. I had no money. I was in debt, and I had graduated from college with no debt. So it was a rough time for me. And I decided, well, you know, the one thing that I had always hated doing was running, but it was probably the only thing that I could afford to
Mm.
do at that point. And so I made the decision that, you know, I, I had to at least get my body in shape. And maybe if I got my body in shape, I could get my mental, my mental makeup back in shape, and
Yes.
everything would improve from there. And so I Googled, how does a blind guy run, and found out that I needed a sighted guide. And went and you know found a website that partnered blinded sighted runners together. Um, Plugged in my zip code. There were two people in my area that had signed up for this website to be sighted guides. I emailed both of them. One of them responded. I said, "Beggars can't be choosers." Went and met up with this guy, and he had
Yeah.
never met a blind person, let alone run with a blind person before. Uh, and we just started running together. And
Mm.
he happened to be a triathlete. He was doing a lot of training on his own, was quite bored, and so peer pressured me into giving triathlon a go, because he basically said, "Running is dumb. You should do triathlon." And I was dumb enough to believe him. And
Yeah, that's pretty
uh,
intense.
yeah, and so that's how I found my way into the sport of triathlon. And eventually just kind of worked my way up through triathlon. And then found myself in a position where I actually got decently good after a period of about 4 or 5 years, and was offered the opportunity to um, train with some pretty elite triathletes at the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center. And eventually worked my way through to going to two Paralympic Games. So
Amazing.
that's it in a nutshell.
Yes, I would say, but that's amazing when you think about it. I mean, first of all, just with nothing hindering you in terms of sight or any other kind of physical thing, the Olympics are sort of intense, regardless whether you can see or not. So, did your running buddy go with you?
No, so that's a whole nother story. But so the guy that got me started in triathlon, this was began about 9, 10 years ago. Uh, so one of the wonderful and terrible things about being a blind athlete and being someone who starts out as slow, and as a beginner as I was, is that you improve very quickly. And at some point you actually outgrow your guide, and you
Mm,
get faster than your guide. And so that
interesting.
happened to me. It's happened to me many times. It's just like, if you are eventually, if you have employees, or someone's leading a company, but it's time for them to move on to bigger and better things. So it's the same concept, same idea. So I basically graduated from one guide who taught me the ropes to another guide who was faster, stronger, knew it better, and then I
Gotcha.
eventually moved on from them, and climbed my way all the way up until I was racing with some of the best athletes, being guided by some of the best athletes in the world.
Amazing.
And so that's been a whole process in making sure to in being able to find, recruit, and develop those guides as I have gotten stronger and faster.
I bet. I bet keeping, there's always a gap, so you have to constantly be filling that gap in terms of performance.
For sure.
But tell us a little bit about this exactly what to say certified guideness that you are. So what is that? Tell us about that.
So, you know, it might be best if if I just give an example. So, like, have you ever
Sure.
been in a situation where you're in a conversation, you walk away from that conversation, and you say, like, I wish I would have said that or this differently, or
Absolutely.
we all have, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, if
so
you're a waking human, yes, I would say that probably has happened to you, right?
exactly. So one of the things that we have found over the course of time, and I, especially as someone who has competed at the Paralympic level, there's a lot of parallels between high performance sport and business, and in
Yes.
particular conversation. And so in high performance sport, we bring a lot of intentionality to our training, our every aspect of our life, our training, our recovery, what we eat, how much we sleep, all that.
Yeah.
And this the same is not always in business and life. So if we can bring just a little bit of forethought and intentionality to the conversations we have in business and life, how much more effective could we be at those conversations? Like, instead of instead of just dialing up and trying to count up the number of conversations that we have, how much better could we do if we just made more of the conversations that we're having count? And
Mm.
so we have as an exactly what to say certified guide, we have these cornerstones of conversational excellence that we walk people through. The worst time to think about the thing you're going to say is in the moment you're saying it. Curiosity is the fuel for great conversation. It's the person that's asking the questions that controls the conversation, and people only do things for their reasons, not yours. So if
Mm.
we keep these thoughts in mind, we can then we can just put a little bit more forethought into the conversations that we're having, either later today, later this week, or later this month. And that can be in business or life, our personal lives, or anything along those lines. And we can actually have more effective conversations.
It makes complete sense. And so when you work with somebody, is it like a program or is it one-on-one coaching that's customized to the person, or how do you work with people?
I primarily do a lot of keynote presentations, introducing people to the work of exactly what to say. But I also do, small group workshops, and so if we're looking to, if a company is looking to, just improve their prospecting, I come in and run either a 90-minute workshop or a series of workshops to help customers, know exactly exactly what to say, when to say it, and how to make it count to improve their prospecting. So that's a lot of the kind of the stuff that I do, and then of course, get up on the big stage and talk to
Right.
bigger companies about about exactly what to say, and exactly what to say. Actually, it started out as a book, not a book that I wrote, but it's a book by a gentleman named Phil M. Jones, and And Phil found that, this tiny little book was getting so much traction that he needed help. He needed help, with kind of spreading the word and
Mm-hmm.
helping people understand that, success leaves clues. And if we know exactly what to say, when to say it, and how to make it count, we can actually all have much better lives across the board. And so he started recruiting, very specific people into his guide network. And so I'm very fortunate to be one of the people that he hand selected to promote, the exactly what to say, the exactly what to say movement.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so when you work with people, what do you find is like the top thing that messes with them in being able to fulfill what they're out to accomplish in their business or their life? What have you discovered out of working with people messes with them the most?
I think, when we talk about, the thing that trips people up most of all is getting entangled in the details. So one of my big things is, you know, one of my big sayings that I particularly use is keep an eye on your vision. So if we keep an eye on our overarching vision and we see how the puzzle pieces all fit together to accomplish that ultimate goal or vision, it's a lot easier to get stuff done.
Yes.
Whereas what happens a lot of the time is, we start to overcomplicate things. Look, I compete in triathlon. Triathlon is not a simple sport. It's three sports rolled into one, but there's five parts. And then you juggle in, you juggle in transition. You juggle, everything that goes on before or after or during. It's a very complicated sport. But at the end of the day, it's the simpler you make it, the more effective you are at the race. And the
Mm,
same goes for our conversations. The same goes in business. Idiots admire complexity. Geniuses admire simplicity. Like the simpler we make it, the more effective we are. Uh, so I think what winds up happening is we get too detailed too quickly. Um, just keep it stupid simple. Do simple well and do
yeah.
simple better. that's
Yeah,
that's at the end of the day.
I am with you. I mean, I'm always when I work with people, when I coach them, I always say keep your eye on the vision, not the vehicle. The vehicle can
Yep.
change, but what is the vision? And then we'll find a way to get there. You don't have to be attached to or myopically focused on the details, the vehicle itself, because that does shift and change over time.
Bingo. Exactly.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. And what would you say for you personally, in those moments where you could have gone down for the count and, just sort of been like, forget it, this is just too much. What did you draw upon to rise above the circumstances? And I don't want to, like it might not have to do with your site or any of
Hmm.
that, but there are circumstances that people deal with, whatever they're
Hmm.
dealing with, that really send them into the world of being messable with. What did you draw upon to emerge unmessable with? Which doesn't mean tough, it means
Hmm.
about being able to stay on track with your vision, being able to act from there versus react to whatever's getting thrown at you.
Sure. I think it's, you know, I think it's really important to kind of understand that, look, at the end of the day, there are three things that motivate us. And, it's, we move, all motivation is a reason to move. And so I needed to find a reason to move that was big enough or strong enough that was either going to move me away from something that I was uncomfortable with
Hmm.
towards something that I was, that made me more comfortable, or towards something that just absolutely made my heart sing. And it was really
Yes.
a combination of all three of those things, using those things strategically. So, you know, looking back, I was tired. I didn't want to be uncomfortable waking up with hangovers and, you know, you know, barely being able to walk from the couch to the couch to the fridge, that was a struggle. So that was making me uncomfortable. So I wanted to move away from that. I wanted to move toward that feeling of, man, I can do anything that I set my mind to. So I was moving toward being comfortable with that. And then the thing that absolutely made my heart sing is just being able to push myself to my absolute limit, knowing that I gave it my all. Competing with myself, not just other people. So keeping all of those forms of motivation in mind, that's what helped me at the end of the day. And at certain times of life, yeah, you have to use the quote unquote negative motivation or the positive motivation. There's all these different forms that it takes on, and I had to use those things strategically and effectively.
Yeah, and but for most people, or not most people, some people, when they get in a situation that's difficult,
Mhm.
while what you say makes complete sense, all that logic goes out the window when
Oh
you're in the
yeah.
heat of the moment.
Oh,
So
for
I'm just
sure.
wondering, like, did you have something that like an epiphany or a coach or someone in your life? Like you said, Eric was a bit, kind of had a come
Hmm.
to Jesus moment with you and kicked you in the pants, so to speak. Was there anything that you can point to that like you would recommend people have in their life, so to speak, or develop in their life?
I think if there's a couple things that I would point to specifically. Number one is, you just, like, if you can't wait for the motivation to come to you. You have to
Yeah.
create it. So get out there and start doing it. So you know, practice. Practice does make perfect, and practice is practice. You just got to get out there and do it. And number two, you have to have the right people around you. Just
Yeah.
like you said, coaches, friends, family members. You have to have people that are willing to you know push you toward what you want to be and hold you accountable. So, for me, it was, my buddy Mike, who got me started in triathlon. He and I actually wound up being roommates together, and
Mm.
we held each other accountable. And then, I eventually, moved on, and, got, was coached by an amazing, coach for the last 6 years, who had some very tough talks with me and about some of the choices that I was making as an athlete, and say, if you want to reach the highest levels of sport, you have to make some changes. Because I told him that I wanted to reach certain levels, and he was the one that held me accountable.
Yeah.
So it's being honest and truthful with yourself, and being honest and truthful with the people around you, and then being able to take, you know, being able to hear them and listen to them,
Yeah.
and know the difference between opinion and advice.
Yeah, very, very, and opinion, advice, and then there's coaching. Because
Exactly.
advice and coaching are very different, right?
They
It's
are
like I don't
very
think,
different.
I don't think the basketball coach on the side of the road is saying, "Let me give you some advice on your shot." No, do this, baby.
Exactly.
Yeah, really.
Exactly.
So tell us where people can find you if they want to learn more about what you do or even work with you.
Yeah. So if you're looking to work with me, or you can find me on LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. Just you can search for me, Kyle Coon, LinkedIn.com/in/Kyle Coon.
And I'll put
Instagram.
all that in the show notes so people can just
Yep.
click on your socials. Yeah.
Yep. And then Instagram also, I'm at Iron Kyle, EYERONKYLE. Those are probably the two easiest ways to find me. Or you can just drop me an email directly, Kyle@kylecoon.com.
Beautiful, beautiful. And do you want to just mention your book so people know about that as well? And I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, so my book is it's called Discovering a Life Without Limits: How Cancer Took My Sight, Blindness Gave Me Vision, and the Mountains Let Me Live. And it details my life up to the point that I got into triathlon, because really what my goal is, through my speaking, my writing, my coaching, all that kind of stuff, and even with the exactly what to say work that I do with Phil and the whole EWTS team, is I want, I'm working to help people live a life without limits by finding their limits and then pushing beyond them. And so discovering a life without limits is, shows people my journey from where I was to up to a point where I had learned that I can actually, I do have limits, and this is how I expand and push beyond them. So it details my life, gives a lot of my adventures and that kind of stuff. And hopefully in the next year or so, we'll be coming out with the sequel, actually detailing my high performance triathlon journey as well.
I love it. I love it. And then one last thing I want to ask you before we sign off is, if you were going to say to our listeners one thing that they could start doing today that would move them towards a life without limits, what would be that one thing? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but
I always love this question. And my one thing that I would say is it's kind of a three-parter, but it's all one thing.
so it's 1A, B, and C. Okay, go
Exactly.
ahead.
Keep it stupid simple.
Yep.
Do simple well, then do simple better.
I love it. I love it. So for everybody listening or watching, depending on how you get your podcasts, look at where you're overcomplicating your life. I love what you said about idiots are drawn to complexity and geniuses love simplicity. So,
Yep.
or so I'm paraphrasing, but for
No,
sure,
that's exactly.
yeah, no, it rings so true. It's like you can't argue with that. And I encourage everybody to look at where you're making things complex, because if it is complex, then you are somehow clouding your vision with a bunch of garbage that
Yep.
doesn't belong there. When you are clear about your vision, things get very simple and the universe falls into place to support you in fulfilling on it. Period.
Couldn't have said it better.
Well, we both said it, we'll say. But thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, Kyle. And for those of you listening, please, if you got value out of today's episode, please share it with somebody in your life who you think could use a little nudge, could use some sort of nugget of inspiration to get them on track to fulfill their vision. And of course, rate and review the episode. That always helps us with whatever they call the algorithms. I don't understand them, but that's what I'm told. So please do that as well. And we'll see you on the next episode of Be Unmessable With, the podcast.
So if you've ever felt like you were just too behind or too broken or just not ready enough to pursue your vision, you are not alone. What Kyle shared today is such a powerful reminder that our limits are often illusions. And with the right mindset, support, and clarity, we can break through those illusions and those limits. But knowing that isn't enough. So if you're ready to stop second guessing yourself and start showing up powerfully, check out the free Transcend Imposter Syndrome process that's linked below. It is designed to help you get out of your own way and into aligned, confident action. And if today hits home, wait until you see what's coming next. Go ahead, watch the next video, and keep building an unmessable with life.